The email came late on a Thursday night, right as I was settling down after another mind-numbing day at work. I had always been meticulous about my emails. Maybe too meticulous. Some might call it a compulsion, but in my line of work as a systems analyst, missing details wasn't an option. I was 35 and precision was my forte, whether it came to coding or my personal life. The subject line was innocuous. You need to see this. For someone who thrived on control, such ambiguity was unsettling. My wife, Megan, was in the kitchen humming to herself while chopping vegetables for a salad she insisted we have every Thursday. I stared at the sender's name. It was a string of random characters ending with a domain I didn't recognize. Normally, I delete such emails without a second thought, but something about this one made my fingers hover. When I opened the email, my stomach tightened. It was brief. A single line of text followed by an attachment folder. Thought you should know. These belong to you. The files were large, taking several minutes to download. During which time, Megan strolled in with her bowl of perfectly diced greens and gave me one of her effortless smiles. She was radiant as ever at 33. Her blonde hair tied neatly into a ponytail, her confidence radiating. Megan had always seemed flawless. An MBA graduate working as a consultant for a top firm. To the world, she was perfect. To me, she was everything. The files finished downloading. I opened the first one, a photo. At first, it didn't register. The lighting was dim, the angle slightly off. Then I zoomed in and recognized her. Megan, sitting on a man's lap, her head thrown back in laughter. The next photo showed them in a car, his hand on her thigh. Another showed them in a hotel room, the timestamp glaring in the corner. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. It felt as though someone had slammed a door in my chest. The timestamps were recent. 2 months ago when she had told me she was on a work trip to Chicago. The betrayal was methodical, premeditated, concealed beneath the polished exterior of the life we had built together. I didn't look up. I couldn't. Megan, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. Come here for a second. What's up? She asked cheerfully, walking over with her salad bowl in hand. I turned the screen toward her. Her smile faltered and the color drained from her face. The room fell silent except for the faint of the refrigerator. She didn't even try to deny it. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she set the bowl down on the counter, her hands trembling. It's not what it looks like, Liam, she stammered. Please just let me explain. But I wasn't in the mood for explanations. Not then. Not yet. I stood up, pushing the chair back with more force than I intended. Explain later, I said curtly, grabbing my keys and walking out the door. I drove aimlessly, my mind racing. Every memory of our marriage flashed before me. The vacations, the anniversaries, the nights spent talking about our future, all of it tainted now. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was a violation of everything we had built, everything I thought we were. I stopped at a quiet overlook staring out at the city lights below. Anger surged through me, but so did something deeper, determination. Megan had underestimated me. Everyone had. I wasn't the kind of man who let people walk all over him. If she thought this would end with a simple apology or a pleading conversation, she was dead wrong. When I got home that night, Megan was sitting on the couch red-eyed, clutching a tissue. Liam, please. I know what I did was wrong, but stop, I interrupted. We'll talk tomorrow. Right now, I need space. I locked myself in the guest room and began plotting. This wouldn't be a messy, emotion-fueled tantrum. No, it would be calculated, precise. Megan and whoever that man was had made a fool of me, and I wouldn't rest until I exposed every lie, every secret, and made them pay for what they had done. The next morning, I woke early. Megan hadn't dared knock on the guest room door, and I hadn't given her the chance to corner me. The air in the house felt tense, heavy with unspoken words. I grabbed my laptop and headed to my office, a small, organized sanctuary where I could think clearly. This wasn't just personal anymore. It was tactical. The first step was simple. Identify the man. I started by examining the metadata on the photos and videos, which led me to pinpoint the location of a hotel in Chicago. A quick search of my credit card transactions revealed nothing unusual. But then I remembered Megan had her own card. One I paid for. Pulling up our shared account, I scrutinized every transaction during the supposed work trip. There it was. A dinner at an upscale restaurant, spa services, and a charge for the very hotel in the photos. Still, that wasn't enough. I wanted names, connections, details. I uploaded one of the photos of the man to a reverse image search. It didn't take long to find him. His name was Jared, and according to his social media profile, he was a mid-level manager at some tech startup in Chicago. His posts were a collection of self-aggrandizing updates about hustle culture and motivational quotes peppered with photos of expensive cocktails and watches. But the real kicker came when I noticed a familiar face in one of his tagged photos. Megan, smiling, carefree, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Teamwork makes the dream work." It was dated the same weekend she had been working late on a supposed client presentation. I dug deeper into Jared's life. His social media trail painted a picture of someone who loved attention, but lacked the foresight to cover his tracks. He had a wife, Nicole, and a young son. The knowledge ignited a spark inside me. I wasn't the only one who deserved to know the truth. Megan tried to talk to me over breakfast. "Liam, I know I messed up, but I love you. Please, let's work this out." I didn't look up for my coffee. "We'll talk after work," I said coldly. "I need time to think." That was a lie. I had no intention of working things out. Instead, I spent my day laying the groundwork for what would come next. During my lunch break, I drafted an email to Nicole. It was short and to the point, accompanied by a selection of photos and videos. I kept it professional, even sympathetic. She deserved to know what her husband had been doing behind her back. By the end of the day, Nicole had replied. Her message was raw, filled with disbelief and anger. We exchanged numbers, and she called me almost immediately. Her voice was shaky, but her resolve was clear. "Thank you for telling me. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I needed to know." I felt a strange sense of camaraderie with her. We were both victims of the same deceit, and while our paths forward would be different, we shared a mutual understanding. This wasn't something either of us could forgive. That evening, I returned home to find Megan waiting for me in the living room. She looked like she hadn't slept, her face pale and drawn. "Liam," she began, "I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to try. I'll go to counseling. I'll quit my job if you want. Whatever it takes." Her desperation was palpable, but it didn't move me. "You think this is something that can be fixed?" I asked, my voice calm but icy. "You lied to me. Repeatedly. You disrespected everything we built together." Tears streamed down her face. "It wasn't serious. It was just a fling?" I interrupted. "Don't insult my intelligence." She broke down, sobbing in her hands, but I wasn't here for tears. "You'll hear from my lawyer," I said, heading to the bedroom to pack a bag. "I'm filing for divorce." Over the next few weeks, my plan unfolded like clockwork. Megan was blindsided when she received the divorce papers, along with a notice to vacate the house within 30 days. The house was in my name, and I had every legal right to reclaim it. She begged and pleaded, even tried to enlist the help of her parents, but I stood firm. Nicole, on the other hand, took a different approach. Armed with the evidence I had provided, she confronted Jared in a public setting. A family dinner. According to her, his attempts to deny everything only made him look more foolish. She was already consulting her own lawyer, and the fallout had begun to ripple through his professional and personal life. But I wasn't done yet. Jared and Megan's affair had left a digital trail, and I knew exactly how to expose it. Carefully, meticulously, I compiled a file of their interactions, including timestamps and locations. Using an anonymous email account, I sent it to Megan's employer. While I avoided outright accusations, the evidence spoke for itself. Within days, Megan was placed under review for breaching company policy. The final piece of the puzzle was Jared. Through Nicole, I learned that his company was on the verge of a major merger. A scandal like this could jeopardize his position. Using my tech skills, I sent an anonymous tip to his CEO, outlining his indiscretions in a professional but damning manner. Jared's Instagram account soon went private, and Nicole confirmed he was being sidelined at work. Megan moved out at the end of the month, and the silence in the house was deafening. But it was a good kind of silence. It was the sound of closure. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was reclaiming it. The morning Megan moved out was surreal. She stood in the driveway with her suitcases, trying one last time to salvage whatever she thought was left between us. Her voice cracked as she said, "Liam, I'll regret this for the rest of my life. I hope someday you can forgive me." I stood by the door, arms crossed. This isn't about forgiveness. It's about consequences. I watched her drive off without another word. Her departure wasn't a moment of triumph or vindication. It was a step toward rebuilding the life she had shattered. I felt no pity, no lingering attachment. The Megan I thought I knew no longer existed, but my work wasn't finished. Megan wasn't the only guilty party, and I had no intention of letting Jared walk away unscathed. Nicole and I stayed in touch, not out of any shared vendetta, but because we both understood the importance of seeing this through. Over coffee one evening, she revealed a crucial detail. Jared's company was relying heavily on his leadership for a new project, one that could make or break their merger. "He's been spinning lies about being the perfect family man," Nicole said, her tone bitter but resolute. "He even had the nerve to tell me this affair was meaningless. Like that makes it any better." She slid her phone across the table, showing me a draft of a carefully worded email she planned to send to his board of directors. It outlined his behavior in both personal and professional contexts backed by the evidence I had uncovered. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "This could cost him his job." Nicole's eyes met mine, unwavering. "He cost me my marriage and my peace of mind." "I'm sure." The fallout began swiftly. Jared's carefully curated reputation unraveled as the truth spread through his workplace. His superiors launched an internal investigation, and while they couldn't fire him outright for personal indiscretions, they quickly reassigned him to a less visible role. Nicole, meanwhile, had filed for divorce, securing a substantial portion of their shared assets thanks to the evidence she provided. But I wasn't satisfied with just professional humiliation. Jared had played a role in wrecking my marriage, and I wanted him to feel the full weight of his actions. With Nicole's permission, I took things a step further. Using my technical skills, I anonymously leaked details of his affair to a local gossip blog that thrived on exposing corporate scandals. The story spread like wildfire, tarnishing his public image and ensuring his career trajectory would never recover. As for Megan, her downward spiral continued. Losing her job had been a blow, but the real damage came when her academic funding dried up. The second degree she had been pursuing, one I had been paying for, was no longer an option. She called me once desperate, asking if I could help her financially just until she got back on her feet. I didn't even consider it. "You made your choices," I told her. "Now you live with them." Her parents eventually stepped in, but even they seemed to be losing patience with her. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she was living in a small apartment, struggling to make ends meet. While part of me felt a fleeting pang of sympathy, I reminded myself that this was the result of her own actions. The weeks turned into months, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. My house felt emptier, but also lighter. I had removed the physical reminders of Megan. Her photos, her belongings, even her favorite coffee mugs. In their place, I filled the space with new things, symbols of a fresh start. My social circle too evolved. Friends who had once been Megan's allies quietly distanced themselves from her, gravitating toward me instead. It wasn't out of loyalty, but because they couldn't ignore the clarity of the evidence I had shared with them. One evening, I hosted a small gathering at my house, something I hadn't done in years. As I looked around the room, I realized how much had changed. I wasn't the same man who had once prioritized stability over happiness, who had overlooked red flags for the sake of maintaining a perfect life. This new chapter wasn't just about revenge. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I wanted. Just when I thought everything had settled, I received an email from an unknown address. For a moment, I hesitated, the memory of that first damning email flashing through my mind. But curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. The message was brief. "You're not the only one he's hurt." Attached were screenshots of messages between Jared and several other women. It seemed his affair with Megan was just the tip of the iceberg. I forwarded the email to Nicole, who called me almost immediately. "This just keeps getting worse," she said. "But it confirms one thing: we did the right thing." Nicole decided to use the new evidence in her divorce proceedings, further solidifying her case against Jared. Meanwhile, I sat back, satisfied that the web of deceit Jared had spun was finally closing in on him. By the end of the year, my divorce was finalized. Megan was out of my life for good, and Jared's world had crumbled. Nicole and I remained on friendly terms, occasionally exchanging updates, but there was no need for ongoing alliances. We had both found our closure in different ways. As for me, I embraced the quiet satisfaction of knowing justice had been served. The pain of betrayal had been sharp, but it had also been transformative. I emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live life on my terms. I didn't rebuild the life I once had. I built something better. After the dust settled, life felt like a blank canvas. The chaos of betrayal and the adrenaline-fueled quest for justice were behind me. And for the first time in years, I faced the question, what now? My life had been so intertwined with Megan's that her absence created a void I wasn't sure how to fill. But rather than let it overwhelm me, I decided to see it as an opportunity. The first step was reclaiming my home. For years, Megan had insisted on a sleek, minimalist aesthetic. White walls, glass tables, and furniture that looked more like art installations than comfortable places to sit. It was all her style, not mine, so I tore it all down. I spent weekends painting walls in warm, earthy tones, replacing cold metal accents with wooden furniture and hanging artwork that spoke to me. By the time I was done, the house no longer felt like a museum curated by someone else. It felt like my home. I also started reconnecting with hobbies I had abandoned during my marriage. In my 20s, I had loved woodworking, a skill I'd picked up from my grandfather. Megan had dismissed it as messy and unnecessary, so I'd let it go. But now, with an empty garage and plenty of time, I dove back in. My first project was a small coffee table, rough around the edges but solid. Each cut, sand, and stain felt like a step toward rebuilding myself. Eventually, I found myself spending less time reflecting on the past and more time looking forward. I joined a local woodworking group, met people who shared my passion, and even started selling a few pieces online. It wasn't about the money, it was about rediscovering joy in creating something with my own hands. Professionally, I threw myself into my work. As a systems analyst, I'd always been good at solving problems, but I realized I had been coasting for years. With Megan's constant demands for attention, I had rarely gone above and beyond at work. That changed. I volunteered for challenging projects, learned new skills, and even started mentoring junior employees. My efforts didn't go unnoticed. Within months, I was promoted to lead analyst, a position that came with a significant pay raise and a newfound sense of accomplishment. But the biggest change was in my mindset. For years, I had been the kind of person who prioritized stability above all else. I avoided risks, stuck to routines, and tolerated situations that didn't make me happy because it felt safer than rocking the boat. Megan's betrayal shattered that illusion, forcing me to confront the fact that safety isn't the same as fulfillment. If I wanted a meaningful life, I had to take risks, emotional, professional, and otherwise. One of those risks came in the form of a woman named Claire. We met at a woodworking expo where she was showcasing her own handcrafted pottery. She had a warm, easygoing demeanor and an infectious laugh that immediately put me at ease. We started talking about our respective crafts, exchanged business cards, and eventually began texting. At first, I was hesitant. After everything I'd been through, the idea of opening myself up to someone new felt daunting. But Claire wasn't Megan. She didn't play games, didn't demand perfection, and didn't make me feel like I had to prove my worth. She was kind, supportive, and unapologetically herself. We started dating slowly, taking the time to get to know each other without rushing into anything. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely seen and appreciated for who I was. Meanwhile, Megan's life continued to unravel. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved back in with her parents and was working a low-paying job at a local cafe. Her once polished image was gone, replaced by a shadow of the person she had been. I didn't revel in her downfall. It wasn't about schadenfreude anymore. I simply saw it as the natural consequence of her choices. As for Jared, the scandal surrounding his affair had permanently tarnished his professional reputation. Nicole finalized their divorce, secured primary custody of their son, and moved on with her life. She occasionally sent me updates, and I was genuinely happy to see her thriving. 1 year after everything began, I stood in my garage looking at the rows of furniture I had built. Each piece represented a step in my journey, out of betrayal, through pain, and into something stronger. Claire walked in carrying a mug of coffee she'd made herself. She handed it to me, smiling as she surveyed my work. "You've come a long way," she said, running her hand over the smooth surface of a table I had just finished. "So have you," I replied, thinking of her own journey to rebuild her life after a difficult divorce years ago. We understood each other in a way that felt effortless, unspoken. I took a sip of the coffee, savoring the moment. This was the life I had built. Not one handed to me, not one shaped by someone else's vision, but one I had chosen for myself. The scars of the past were still there. Faint reminders of what I had endured, but they didn't define me. They were just part of the story, not the ending. In the end, revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about reclaiming what had been taken. My dignity, my happiness, my future. I didn't need to carry the weight of anger or resentment anymore. Justice had been served, and I had moved on. Standing there with Claire by my side, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. My life was my own again, and that was the greatest victory of all. Thank you, friends.